Hello and welcome to Neurodivergent Solutions, a bite-sized episode of the Divergent Paths podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Regina McMenomy, and I am a doctor, but not that kind of doctor, and this is a podcast, not medical advice. Today, I'm going to be diving into a pretty heavy topic. I'm going to be talking about neurodivergence and grief. And the reason why I am choosing this time to talk about this topic is because my brother just passed away this week, and I have been in the throes of dealing with my grief over losing the last of my immediate family. And as I've been processing through this and going through all of the motions that you go through after someone passes away, I couldn't help but think about how different this is impacting me this time, because this is the loss that I have gone through as a diagnosed neurodivergent person and understanding myself in a way that I have never before while I've been grieving. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what it's like to grieve when you have neurodivergence and how some of the topics that we've talked about in the past really impact grief in a way that you may not understand. Definitely that I haven't understood in previous times in my life. So just to say this, grief is hard for everybody. Loss is extremely difficult. It impacts everybody differently. And grief can look wrong because nobody grieves like you do. Regardless of whether or not you are neurodivergent or neuronormative, everybody grieves differently. When you are neurodivergent, grief can short circuit your executive functioning and scramble your ability to really understand what you're feeling. So the three things that I want to talk about in this episode are the executive load that you carry when you are grieving, especially if you are, as I am in this, the person who is handling all of the arrangements for the person who passed away. Alexithymia, which is the inability to recognize what you're feeling, and rejection sensitivity, which is where we take criticisms as personal affronts. So a brief definition, executive functioning is your brain's task manager. It is the ability you have to plan, to remember, to switch tasks, and what helps you regulate your nervous system. Grief breaks your executive functioning. All of your executive functioning gets driven towards survival tasks. In this case, for me, about paperwork, about making phone calls, about making sure things get done, about making decisions about what's happening when and how. In my case right now, it's also travel arrangements, which takes a large piece of things. And if you didn't know, a lot of the work of grief is done on the phone. So I have been on many phone calls in the last few days. In fact, my podcast editor is very graciously editing this for me a day late because I told him I had been on the phone so much yesterday I just could not actually speak anymore. So grief is the epitome of executive dysfunction, having the weight and having all of the loss upon you takes away what is a limited resource you have as someone who is neurodivergent and makes it even harder for you to function. So one of the pieces of advice, one of the things I've been trying to do is to remain mindful of eating and of water intake. I have had some very good friends who have been keeping on me about making sure I eat regular meals and I drink good amounts of water and that I get moving my body, because these are things that do help. So recognizing that your self-care is going to make the grieving process easier is really important. Working to put things that are still fun and joyful in my life as I'm going through this process and not allowing myself to just get lost in the tasks that I need to do. And it isn't really about being highly productive right now. It's about doing enough to stay above water. There's been research on grief and neurodivergence that has borne out that even in neurotypical brains, grief overloads your executive systems. So your executive functioning gets overloaded, even if you weren't neurodivergent. So the fact that if you have autism or ADHD, that's going to be magnified by the grief. So right now I am feeling very much like my ADHD is ADHDing really hard right now. And it is not a surprise. There is research that backs the fact that if you have ADHD, it's going to get worse while you're grieving. So we've talked about alexithymia before, and that emotional numbness about not being able to recognize what you're feeling, not being able to name your emotions, and not being able to identify them in your body. This is something that's very common for people with ADHD and autism. There might be times, and this has already happened to me, when people are sad and I'm just not feeling anything. And I feel horrible about that. And I feel a fair amount of guilt that maybe I don't feel the right way that I'm supposed to feel. So I'm trying to remind myself that numbness isn't the absence of grief. It's protection right now, especially right now, in that I am overloaded with executive functioning tasks and decisions to make. So it's not that I'm not feeling those things. It's just that my mind is honestly protecting me from a lot of them right now, because that's what it needs to do. That's what my brain needs, and it knows how to survive. So one of the things that I'm trying to work on, and is a tool that I would encourage any of you who have struggles with alexithymia, to identify how your body feels. Like, think about sensations. I have said to several people in the last couple of days that my chest feels really heavy. I'm actually rubbing my chest as I'm saying this, because I have just felt like a pressure and a weight on my chest. There have been times when I have just felt really restless, and I have had trouble falling asleep because my brain ends up just cycling through things. So I'm trying to keep the sensations in mind and allowing space for the emotions to catch up with me later, because we still have a lot of movement to go through. So rejection sensitivity is when you have intensified reactions to feeling rejection or guilt. And so this is coming in with thoughts along the lines of, I should have done more, I could have visited more often, I could have done all of these different things, I could have been more present, I could have made more phone calls, whatever it is that it manifests. I have had several of these sort of rejection sensitivity comments run through my head. So I'm trying to remind myself that that is also my brain trying to make sense of what's happening. And, the guilt that I might carry is because on some level, I always feel like I haven't done enough, even if I have done a lot. And I generally do a lot. I'm trying to reframe this. And the way I'm trying to deal with this is to talk back to that guilt-laden voice in my brain and remind myself that I've done a lot, and that I do a lot, and that I showed up where and when and how I could, when I could show up in those ways, and remind myself that nobody's perfect, especially when it comes to our families. If you're listening to this and you're grieving and you feel like your brain is broken, it's not. It's just doing the best it can right now. Take some time to think about what feels really hard right now. What are the tasks? What are some of those physical emotions or the physical sensations that you're having? What emotions might they be tied to, if you have the ability to push into what your emotions are? Where is your feeling of potentially self-blame coming from? And instead of letting those run, like, pull back into your body, do a grounding exercise that works for you. If breathing works for you, do some deep breathing. If bilateral grounding of like a butterfly tap works, where you put your hands on your chest and you tap on either side of your chest as you're, breathing. If something like that helps me a lot of the time. Do a physical check-in and see where you're at. And if you haven't, stop and drink some water, because chances are you need to stop and drink some water. So if you are going through this, if this is something that you're experiencing, you might consider looking at our episodes on alexithymia, on burnout, and on rejection sensitivity, because all of those are, things that are impacted by grief. So thank you so much for listening. Remember that your grieving brain is doing the best that it can for you, and you are doing the best you can for your people.